Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindy Chavez here. Today is Tuesday, September the 18th, 2018. 8 a.m. Eastern Time, your first daily dose of happy for the day. We hope your week's off to a great start, as we always do, because we want everybody to be in that high-flying, good-feeling place at all times. And we want that because we know, and our listeners know, that's the place to be when you want to do your deliberate creating, because then the deliberate creation actually comes out to what you deliberately had in mind, rather than something that's completely in the wrong direction, which so often happens when we're focusing from a place of, oh, I don't feel so good today. I mean, that's what I've been noticing lately, Cindy, how it's just, it's crazy how important the level of our emotions is whenever we're deliberately focusing our thought and hoping that it'll produce a particular kind of result. Because, oh boy, do we go crazily off path whenever we do it from a place of not feeling great, you know?
And so often we do it from a place of not feeling great because that's the impetus to get us to want things to
Yes, right. It's like this little trap.
Like, oh, I can't take this anymore. Well, okay. That's okay. But then we need to really be true to that idea that we don't want that anymore and not keep looking at it.
And that's the challenge right there. I mean, we're basically all trying, in a sense, we're trying to be Pans, you know? We're trying to always be playing the flute and dancing along, and we see something we like, and we keep dancing that way, and we see something we don't like. Oh, we're not going to dance that way. Keep dancing over this way.
It sounds so easy.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Why isn't it that easy? I haven't figured that one out entirely.
Well, I think it can be that easy.
It can be. It certainly gets easier the more that we practice, trying to get ourselves into that better feeling place. That's what I've been learning over the last number of years now, that early on, I thought I couldn't do it at all. And then I found that I could move the needle ever so slightly, which astonished me. And ever since then, it's about trying to move it in little increments, a little more at a time. And finding that the more I do that, the better overall I am. I still have my moments. I still have my moments of being pretty down, really. But there are more up moments than there were before. So I know we can improve. Because if I can improve, anybody can. That's what I figure.
Well, I like the way you said a second ago, a little at a time, a little at a time.
Mm.
I think we forget that sometimes. And it's really frustrating when we try to make too big of a move and it doesn't work out. I mean, I think about in any area of life, we try to do something that's just a little beyond the scope of what we should be attempting. And it gets frustrating because it's just too much. And we always have better success if we'll just go a little bit at a time, one step at a time, one move at a time, a little bit at a time, up that emotional scale, whatever it is. And yet sometimes we want to take a big leap.
Oh, of course we do. We have attention deficit disorder as a society. So, yes, we all want to get there immediately, quickly. And that's understandable. But I've also found that with my own struggling to break through, it may be ongoing, but the aspect of constantly going after it is how I end up discovering the value and the power of the little incremental steps. Because usually that's about all I can ever achieve anyway. So.
Right.
There may be times that I try to go for the really, really big leap and I don't get anywhere. And like you say, I get frustrated. And other times I just go for something a little bit better and I get there. I get a little bit better, and that little tiny bit of victory kind of redirects me to, okay, well, just go for a little bit better. There's got to be something at least somewhat better than where I am right now. And you keep going at it that way, and that actually wins. But the point is it reinforces itself too. That I think is the great power of it. That even though you're taking these small steps, every small step leads to a small victory, which makes it easier to take the next small step.
Yeah, I was thinking about the idea of, I keep a bullet journal, and sometimes I'll create like a habit chart. And I was thinking about that the idea of keeping a journal or a log is probably a better word, because it's more of what I'm pointing at, not a journal in the sense of writing any kind of lengthy entries about certain events, which I think that's a great thing too. And I do that, but keeping a log of successes, because we have a tendency, sort of like keeping a dream journal, which I did for years and years. And I do it now occasionally, but I will pick up a dream journal even from the past year. As a matter of fact, recently I opened a dream journal and I read a dream that I had maybe 3 months ago. And it was like, what? Like, I did not remember having this dream. I had to read the whole thing. And then it sort of started coming back to me. And once again, it kind of solidified that idea in my mind. I thought, we really do forget things. And we forget those small victories. And so when we make a note of them, just a quick note, even sometimes going back, it's really, encouraging to go back and see the places where we did have victories and what led to the victory and what thing that we did that really worked. It's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. That's a good idea. Whatever it is. So I was just in my mind, I was wondering, I'm like, do any of the Abraham Hicks books, I mean, I know they talk about the book of positive aspects. Do they talk about this?
In what sense? What do you mean?
Well, do they talk about, keeping a log of?
Oh, I see what you mean. Keeping tracking. No, I don't think they've ever
Yeah.
talked about tracking it like that. Because that's really what you're doing. You're tracking successes. And I like that idea. I think it's a great idea.
Right.
I mean,
I really like it. I do it pretty often. And I just had never even thought about talking about it before. But actually, when I think about it now, that dream that I had written down wasn't in a dream journal. I have so many journals, but I have a journal where I write down intentions and I wrote it in there. And I just happened to see it when I was going back to look for something else. And I guess I just put it in there because it came up, when I was making a note about something and it seemed to be relevant. But I think that keeping a log or tracker, like I said, I put a habit tracker in some of my bullet journals where I make it like a grid. So it's like the number of the days across the top of a month, and then down the side will just be things that I want to make sure that I do. And sometimes it'll be, there's a lot of health things in there for me. Maybe take a supplement or do yoga or go for a walk, move my body somehow, drink enough water, meditate. All these things will be in there, and I'll just put a dot or an X on the day when I do those things. And sometimes we trick ourselves and we think, oh yeah, I've been doing whatever, every day. And then I look at the habit tracker. Well, okay, kind of every day.
yeah, well, there's that too, right?
Every other day. But it's not like to judge myself or to beat myself up if I don't, it's just to be able to look back at a period of time that's maybe a couple of weeks or a month and say, oh, okay, I'm doing really well with this one. This one seems to come easy. This one, why am I struggling with this habit? Why am I not drinking enough water every day or whatever it is? I think it's really useful.
Well, you got me thinking. I'm wondering if maybe in the age of the smartphone, what we really need is a new app. And it's an app where you dictate into the smartphone each time that you have a victory of some kind. And then the app keeps track of what you actually entered as well as when you enter it, and then gives you like a graph or a map showing how frequently you're reporting good feeling stuff happening in your life.
Very good. Now, see, I'm an analog person. I have notebooks and pens all over the place. I do have a smartphone. I do have a really nice smartphone, and I don't use too many of those kind of trackers or things on the phone. I don't know why that is, but I like to buy paper and ink.
Well, if we were part of the younger generation, we'd be doing everything on the smartphone. So,
Oh, yeah, I know. Wow.
that's why I was thinking about an app, because I figure an app is something that almost anybody could identify with. And those of us who are, who grew up with paper and pen, we can still use the paper and pen if we want to.
Well, new project?
New project. Oh my goodness. Just what I need. Something else to do. I need more being, less doing.
I know, right? Well, that is the answer. I've been more and more this week. I've been going back to, well, I'm not going back to. I never leave this place, but just I always have this realization of how important it is to be aligned first.
Yes.
And it never fails to bring a better result. Alignment first.
It is true. If nothing else, the better result is that you just feel better.
Well, and that's just going to bring a better result, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But I mean, for those of us who have the ADHD approach, right, where we want the instant result, that's the instant result. You feel better.
Right. Exactly. And that's the thing that I always go back to. And when I do, the results get better instantly. And that is, and I always seem to have a little trouble relating this, but I don't think it should be that hard. That is going into that place, taking the time, whether it's a minute, 10 minutes, going into that place where we're experiencing what we think we would experience if we had whatever it is that we desire. I mean, some people say, well, I don't know what that would feel like. I've never had it, right? I understand that. So this is where we'll use your imagination, because if you want something, you don't want it because you have no idea what it will be like.
Good point.
You want it because you think it's going to be better. You want it because you think it's going to be good. You want it because you think you're going to enjoy it, and you think you're going to feel a certain way. We always want something because we think it will make us feel a certain way. But the truth is, nothing can make us feel a way. We can feel however we want to feel. And so if we will take those moments to feel how we think we will feel when we get this thing, whatever it is we want, and decide that we're going to take those moments to enjoy that feeling, not because it's going to make the thing happen, just because we want to enjoy that feeling. That's when things really get good. When we can just decide, I'm going to take 2 minutes to enjoy this just because it's so enjoyable. Just as if it were something delicious you were eating, or a beautiful song you were listening to, or, something else you enjoy very much. It's like, that's why I'm doing it. Because it's enjoyable right in the moment. That's alignment.
It is alignment. But let's take this into the topic we said we were going to talk about today, because we're going to talk about health. And interesting thing about the topic of health is the moment we talk about health, what we're really talking about is the lack of health, right? We're talking about people who are sick or diseased or aging or, decrepit or whatever it is that we never think about, which is really the problem. We never really think about us as being, in the peak of health and in the pink, so to speak. We always think of health as being a health issue. Right? Health is always an issue. Why is that?
Right. Well, and there's actually, people will use the topic that's kind of a joint topic of health and wellness.
Yes.
Or I know, when the babies are small, we often take them to the doctor for a wellness checkup, right? It's like, we're not going because there's anything wrong. Mm-hmm. We just want to check the level of wellness. But I think that the important thing is, because you're right, and usually this is one of those topics. This is one of those things that I'm wanting to use law of attraction and change my circumstance because I don't like the way I'm feeling.
and ironically, whenever we're talking about getting a wellness checkup, even that's a lie. Because what do they test? Do they test for wellness? No, they test for sickness. They're testing. Is there a sickness here? Nope. 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 In fact, wellness centers, health centers and wellness centers, the University of Connecticut, like so many places, has its own health center, which is basically a hospital with some research facilities attached to it, right? And the interesting thing about the UConn Health Center is that it keeps growing and growing and getting filled up with more and more sick people. And I say to myself, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this concept. We're talking about trying to improve health, and all we end up with is more sick people. What's going on here?
Wow. Yeah. And you see the buildings adding on, and the buildings
are getting constantly
bigger. Yeah, bigger and bigger. Well, I think that part of this is that we need to take, you've been speaking about incrementally getting better at things, little by little, step by step. And I remember back at the beginning of this year when I had the big revelation really about pivoting, and because my body was feeling like it was trying to get a terrible head cold.
Right.
And I woke up with all those symptoms that you have when you think you're getting a head cold, and it was awful. And I realized, I staved it off and it went completely away finally after several bouts. It never completely came. And I do believe that was because I was practicing pivoting. But the hardest part of that pivot was when I would be, especially in the morning, just waking up. Oh, it's still here. I'm still feeling bad. My head is hurting. My throat is hurting. And I would be naming all the symptoms to myself as I'm labeling them as I'm observing them. Right? Because we have a habit of labeling everything.
Of course.
And then I think I started, it was very easy to imagine a new one. It's like, oh, my head hurts and my throat hurts. Oh, I bet I'm getting a fever. Do I have a fever? I feel like I have a little bit of a fever. I don't even know if it was true. And my mind would start, yep, and I bet you have these and all these symptoms. And so at the time, we were studying about pivoting. And so I thought, yeah, I don't want this. Why am I thinking about these things I don't want? And I would pivot and I would ask myself, what do I want? Well, I want to be healthy. Well, why do you want to be healthy? Well, because I don't want to be sick. And I knew that wasn't good enough.
But it's the answer.
That's not the right answer.
But it's the answer we all give. It's the answer that everybody thinks about.
So then I would say, no, not good enough. Why do you want to be healthy? And I'm telling you, it's not that I can't say I didn't know why, but it was hard to find the vocabulary for it.
Yeah.
And so I really and I realized how much easier it was to go down the symptom road and just talk about how bad everything was in my mind, internal chatter, than to say, no, I don't want this. I want to be well because I want. And so I would it took some mental energy to start thinking of lists of reasons. I want to wake up feeling great. I want to have energy. I want to be pain-free. I want my voice to be in good shape for the podcast. I would start going on. And if I could only think of 4 or 5, I'd just say them over.
Yeah.
A broken record.
Right.
And it worked.
Sure.
It worked. I started feeling better. And a few days went by and it started happening again. And I did the same thing. I think I did it 2 or 3 times last winter. And then one day I realized that I felt really great and that it never happened. I never went beyond some very minor symptoms.
And to take your point a step further, look at the way people get sick and how they recover from being sick. They get sick, and I'm getting sick, and start itemizing the symptoms, and it's feeling worse and all that. And then you get really, really sick, and then you're sick for a while. And then eventually you recover. Now, when you're recovering, do people say, I'm getting better? Ooh, I'm getting better. I'm feeling much better. I'm getting better. No, usually what happens is they get to the point where the symptoms are gone. They say, oh. That's the best they can say for, I'm glad I feel better. Oh, thank goodness. Never celebrating it, So we'll take the awfulization to the extreme level, but we'll never celebrate the getting better. Why is that?
Or we say, oh, I'm much better now. I'm so thankful because, I was down for like 2 weeks and it was awful. And I had, we're going to list it all again.
So even when we do celebrate, we still aren't celebrating. Oh, good grief. It is so easy for us to do that kind of thing. I think it shows why it is we really need to be deliberate, and that's why it's called deliberate creation. We need to be deliberate about celebrating. We need to be deliberate about focusing on what's going well and why it's going well and why we're well, for one thing, and the fact that we are well. Getting excited about being well. When was the last time I can't remember the last time I got excited about being well. I'm well, hooray! I'm well. I feel so well. But we should be doing that.
It's true, though. It's true because, you brought this up one time when you were really struggling to heal your knees.
Yes.
And what you brought up was you were like, the rest of my body is doing great. Like, it's like there are lots of other things I could focus on.
That's right.
Right. And one time you talked about, I think, was it your hand? You were like, well, my other hand is fine. So I'm going to focus on the hand that's fine.
Yeah.
Focus on the that's fine. And I think that, pain makes it hard to do that.
It does.
Which is why I try to find techniques to deal with that. There's tapping. That's a really great technique. There's the magic trick that we talked about a week or so ago. That's a really good technique to lessen those painful symptoms so that we can switch our focus to something else, put the focus something else. What we focus on expands. So
and remind people what the magic trick is too.
Pain.
For somebody who missed that episode, remind them what the magic trick is.
Well, it's a method used in hypnosis where what we do is first we assign a number to the pain, which is referred to as an SUD, a subjective unit of discomfort. And so usually I'm very careful about being specific about that. So let's say it was a headache. I may say on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being there's really no pain at all. It's just maybe something that I'm noticing, but it's not quite right. But it's not really that painful. It might just be uncomfortable, might be very slight. With 10 being the pain is so bad that I'm not sure how I'm going to get through it. It's like, so it's real extreme. And I never overthink it because usually the number will pop up automatically. Oh, it's a 4, whatever. And I always want to be safe, to say I'm not a doctor. And if you're having pain that's extreme or pain that you're not sure how to handle, please see a doctor,
right.
Or please seek treatment from
medical.
someone who's a professional.
Yeah.
But this has worked for me, generally speaking, when, the pain, when no one wants pain. So when there's pain and it's bothersome, first to assign the number to it. So I know where that pain is on the scale. And then to ask myself, where the pain's located and if the pain had a size and a shape, or a shape and a color, what shape and color would it be?
Mm-hmm.
So I may say, well, it's bright red and it's the size of an egg. Okay. Is it rough or smooth? If it could hold water, how much water would it hold? And does it feel cold or hot? And I just ask myself descriptive questions over and over. And most of the time, it's pretty amazing because I'll go through as many descriptive questions as I can. And then I'll ask myself, or the person that I'm working with, so what's the number now? And like 99% of the time, the number will be smaller.
Uh-huh.
It'll be less pain. And is it still red and shaped like an egg? Oh no, now it's purple. It's like a marble. Often it also shrinks in, description. It's like, and so it's just a nice technique to use. There's also EFT, which, is all over the internet. If you're not sure.
I wanted to ask you something more about the magic trick. Actually, 2 things I wanted to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, and this came to me as like a humorous question to ask, but have you ever asked, is it full of hot air?
It probably is. If we're creating everything in our imagination, then why not? Right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, it is funny, but yeah. I have had a couple of times when, not generally when I'm asking someone else, but when I've been asking myself, where it's gotten bigger or the number's gone up. It's like it seems to have gotten a little bit worse before it gets better, but the whole process usually takes, just a few minutes, and I've had good results with it. So what's the other question?
Well, the other question is almost smart alecky, which is, okay. It's a subjective unit of discomfort. Why aren't we measuring subjective units of comfort?
Well, I understand what you're saying. And it's one more example of us focusing on what we don't want.
Yeah, exactly.
The truth is we're trying to observe the pain. And so we're going to, and pain is is uncomfortable. So, and that's a term that was taught to me by a medical professional. So I think it is actually the term that they use.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah, I'm
yeah.
not doubting that it's the term that they use. It just strikes me that we never have anything where we're trying to measure subjective units of comfort.
Well, that's what we should do. You were saying a minute ago that why don't we celebrate just, any given time when we're feeling well? Hey,
Yeah.
I feel well today. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being you feel pretty good, and 10 like you feel so good you can't stand it. Where are you on that subjective unit of wellness? And it's like, oh, I'm a 7. I'm feeling pretty good. Okay, well, what can we do to get you to an 8 or a 9?
I love that. I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, we could even change the scale to I feel no comfort for somebody who still feels they're in the negative range but want to be represented on it. Well, I feel no comfort at all, so I'm a 0. Okay. Or I'm at a 10 where I feel so comfortable that I've never felt so comfortable in my life.
I feel so comfortable. I'm gonna go get a nap.
But that's just it. I mean, I continue to be amazed at all the different ways we have trained ourselves through our society to focus on negatives. Even when we're trying to get better, we're still focusing on negatives.
Yeah. And it was hard. I mean, goodness, and all I'm talking about is a head cold, right?
Yeah, right.
Of course, I always say, when someone has a cold, are they really sick? No, it's just a cold. Until I have a cold, and then I feel like it's the end, right? It's like, colds are awful. But even so, it was really difficult to pivot and to focus on what I wanted and how I wanted to feel and why I wanted to feel that way. And the thing is that I couldn't hold the focus very long. I would get 2 sentences out, and all of a sudden, my head, I would want to go back over to feeling, oh yeah, this is awful. And my brain would right away be saying, oh, you're going to be down for a week.
Yeah, right.
You're not, you probably should cancel client sessions, or, you're not going to make the podcast tomorrow. Think of how you feel. And it's like, it's not even till tomorrow. So I would all of a sudden, I hear what I'm doing in my head. I'm thinking these thoughts again, switch back over, start thinking about what I want, how I want to feel, why I want to feel that way, what it would be like if I felt really great. It never lasted for more than a few minutes. I pivoted and pivoted and pivoted. I was just spun around and around and around like a rotisserie chicken. Just like, there it goes again, over and over and over.
A rotisserie chicken. That's just a great. So basically, we're basically turning our emotional patterns on a spit and constantly exposing ourselves to the fire. Like, oh yeah, that pretty much right. That summarizes it, doesn't it?
Exactly. So that's the important thing. Is recognizing that if you're pivoting like that, and hey, I mean, I get it. We've all been there where we feel really bad and we're dealing with pain, or we're dealing with illness of some kind that's chronic, and it's just like the never-ending story. And here's the thing, that you may have to pivot every 2 minutes. I mean, over and over and over. It doesn't mean that you're not getting it or that you're not doing it right. You are.
Right.
That's how you do it. It's a little bit at a time.
That's right.
It's coming back to it and coming back to it. I always use this example, but it's the same thing with people who say, well, I can't meditate. I can't meditate. I've tried it. I try to be quiet. I try to get my mind to be still. My mind starts wandering. I have to bring my mind back. And I bring my mind back to focus on, whatever we're focusing on in a meditation, on my breath, whatever, on my mantra, on the guided words I'm hearing. I try to bring myself back, and 20 seconds later, my mind is wandering again, and I have to bring myself back again. And then I just can't do it. I can't, my mind just keeps wandering.
20 seconds? 20 seconds would have been a victory for me.
Yeah.
I mean, there were times when I'd be directed like in a second. I'm trying to focus on the breath or whatever, and boom, I'm right back on the thing I'm not supposed to be focusing on. But the amazing thing to me, though, and I love what you're saying here, because what you're really saying is practice it. You got to keep going. You just got to keep practicing. Got to keep trying it. And what that reminded me.
To trust the process.
And trust the process. Yeah, that's right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's in the process. It's not the product. It's the process. It's that is the meditation. That
Mm-hmm.
is the pivot. Is the process of coming back when you find yourself going in the wrong direction. It's like you used to make the joke, which I think is so appropriate though. It's like make a legal U-turn.
Yes.
It's like the GPS. It's like when you go in a different direction than your navigation is telling you, it will
Mm-hmm.
tell you, it will correct itself
Right. Exactly.
and say either to make a U-turn or it just gives you another set of directions because, it told you to turn, you didn't. Okay, well, now we need to correct that. And I mean, as far as I know, my navigation system doesn't like scold me or, say mean things to me. It just says, okay, you missed that turn. Now you need to make a U-turn or now you need to make the next turn or whatever. And so for us, when we're pivoting, when we're trying to bring ourselves back to why we want health, we just do that. We just trust the process. We find ourselves thinking about our symptoms or thinking about how bad it could be. That's the other thing is you had a word the other day. Is it awfulizing?
Awfulizing. Yeah.
When we're awfulizing and we catch ourselves to bring ourselves back. What's the opposite of awfulizing? Wonderizing. I don't know what it is.
That's good. No, that's a good word. I like that. Wonderizing is good, or joyizing, or happyizing.
So when we catch ourselves, awfulizing or thinking about how bad it is, we just pivot. We don't go, oh, there I go again. I'm never going to be, no. Just say, oh, caught myself. Bring us back.
Mm-hmm. Well, the point that you were making made me think of the story that I told a number of months ago. You mentioned my knees. There was one point where one day the knee pain became excruciating, and nothing I did would relieve the pain. I ended up putting some ice on it just to bring the swelling down, and that ultimately helped. But while I was waiting for the swelling to come down, the pain was really, really intense. And there was no place to go. I was lying down. I was waiting for the ice to do its stuff. There was nothing else to do except live there with the pain. And I said, well, I can't just do that. I got to do something. I'm a law of attraction podcaster. I got to do something, right?
Right.
So I decided, well, I'm going to try to remove the pain from my mind and focus on something else. And Cindie, I tried that for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and didn't make a dent. Couldn't move off of it at all. But, and this is the big but, I kept trying anyway. I was like, the song about the ant trying to move the rubber tree plant. Everyone knows that an ant can't move a rubber tree plant, but he had high hopes. Well, I didn't necessarily have high hopes. My hopes were actually pretty low, but I kept trying to remove the damn rubber tree plant, even though I couldn't do it. And you know what happened? I actually did it. For a split second, to my amazement, I actually managed to get my mind so much off the pain that I didn't feel the pain. It didn't last very long. It was like literally a split second. But I realized I'd actually stopped the pain. And I did it just by thinking. And that kept me going even more. And literally, it was the same thing you talked about. You talked about how one hand's injured, the other hand's fine. Well, it was at that point in time, even though both knees had been injured, the right knee was actually feeling pretty good. It was the left knee that was aching. So I focused on the right knee. And I just said, I am only going to focus on that knee. And it took a lot. I mean, literally, it took every ounce of energy I had to deliberately not pay any attention to that left knee and pay only attention to that right knee. And it took a lot of failures, too. But when I finally broke through and managed for just that split second to be focusing only on the right knee, that left knee disappeared from my realm of attention. I mean, literally, it was gone. And so I tried it again. And as I kept doing it, I could do it for like a second. And then maybe a second and a half. And then 2 seconds. I'm saying, oh my God, I'm doing it.
I'm doing it. It's like when you learn how to ride a bike and you're a little kid and somebody's holding onto the back. And all of a sudden you realize they let go and 1 pedal, 2 pedal, 3 pedal, I'm doing it.
Except that I'm doing it in the midst of having pain, screaming in agony in my head. That's the part. I mean, riding a bike is simple by comparison.
Yeah. So when you were doing that at the beginning, at the very beginning, when you were focusing, you said you were drawing your focus away from the painful
and putting it onto something that was not painful. Something that felt good.
Did you find yourself sort of like holding two thoughts at once? I mean,
I can't say I was holding two thoughts at once. What I was doing was noticing how, despite every effort to pull my attention away, there was a piece of me that insisted on hanging on to that pain. It just, I know the pain's there, so I got to keep watching it. You know,
yeah. It's screaming at you too. So that's
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's there. So, I mean, I would be pretending that what isn't if I didn't pay attention to it. And so a piece of me just kept paying attention to it and it kept hurting. And I kept paying attention to it and it kept hurting. And finally, at some point, I just kind of managed to rip myself away from it. Like, no, I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on this instead. I've got really almost pissed about it. and really, really insistent. And that's when I had my breakthrough.
Well, that's interesting that you just said that you got really insistent. So
Yes.
Your level of emotion you said, you were almost pissed at it. Okay. So there was some anger, like, no, like I am not. There was very, strong emotion.
Very.
That was saying no. And it always, I tell you what that reminds me of, in the movie Wonder Woman, when she finally uses her power, it's because of a really strong emotion.
Oh,
or maybe
okay, yeah.
when she discovers her power, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, whoa. And when I saw that in the movie, I think I said out loud in the theater, I said, that's the law of attraction. Like, in other words, that's when we see results, when our emotions get involved. And when our emotions are fierce.
Yes.
And it may be anger. And I'm not saying to fiercely go, project your anger somewhere in a way you shouldn't. But sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's frustration, sometimes it's love, But I mean, when we finally get our imagination powered up, I guess that's a good term.
Mm-hmm.
We start to see some movement.
Yeah. Well, it's like Abraham says that you may not be able to reach for joy, but you can usually reach for anger. It may be just slightly higher on the scale if you're depressed, but it is higher, And,
Right.
And I think the same thing applied here. It wasn't a great feeling to feel anger or rage or frustration or being pissed off, but it felt better than hurting. And that's why I went for it. I mean, I didn't think about, geez, maybe this feels a little bit. I didn't do an analysis of it. It just felt better, so I went there,
Right.
But you're right. The passion of it is what made the difference. I definitely am sure of that. It was really clear to me that just by building myself up, getting really determined with how high my level of emotion was, that's what helped me to break through.
Like I can hear the Chariots of Fire music.
Yes, right.
Right? I mean, think of every great movie where there's a great victory, right? It's always because someone suddenly is so determined.
Yes.
That nothing is going to stop them.
Exactly.
And, that's just what you described. It's like, oh, no, I'm not. I'm going to have the victory over this pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what it takes sometimes.
It does. And the good news is you don't have to do it all the time. Like I had that first victory, and I had to work pretty hard for the second one, too. I had to get the emotion built up. But you actually can get to the point where the emotional intensity can still decrease and you have success with it. It's the initial breakthrough because you're trying to reverse that negative momentum you've been building up all this time. The breakthrough is the hardest part. After that, if you keep at it, you can keep working at it, kind of like chipping away at it. Chipping away, until finally you're not feeling the pain anymore.
Well, and you are doing quite well with that, aren't you?
Better and better.
Yeah.
I mean, compared to where I was 10 years ago, I thought that was impossible. Literally. I did not think that was possible at all. So just any kind of breakthrough is amazing. But
well, I mean, specifically, like your knees are doing much better.
Oh, yeah. Well, interesting follow-up to that. I got to the point where my knees were great. I mean, like I could go do my walks, I could do all my usual stuff and so forth. Everything was fine except if I went into a very deep knee bend. So I just didn't do that. Interestingly enough, I didn't do anything about that last little bit, that last 1%, for months. And I was noticing just the other day, it was still there. And I'm thinking, well, doggone it. I did all of that work to get rid of the 99% and I haven't gotten rid of the 1%. Maybe I should do something about that. And so I decide, all right, I'm going to get rid of it. I'm not sure exactly how yet, but I'm going to get rid of it. And literally, what I did, Cindie, was I climbed up on top of the mattress, kneeling on the mattress, and using the mattress, I just, as something to stabilize myself, I put my hands on either side to just stabilize myself. And then I would slowly lower myself until I started to feel the pain from having, the full, not
Right.
extension, but the full squeezing, so to speak, the full bending of the knee, so that my calves were pressed up against the hams of my thighs. And when I get to that point, I could feel the whole ligament tightening. I could feel it. I didn't want to do it too much because I could see how I could injure it. And then I would push up with my hands to take the pressure off, and then I went down after it again. And I've gone and done that exercise a few different times, and each time I'm getting more and more close to the idea of totally being able to stretch the ligament to its full extent without injury. I haven't gotten to the point where I've tested it yet to get down to a full squat and then see if I can stand up again. I don't feel like I'm ready physically yet for that, but already I'm seeing the result. In other words, my determination to keep trying to push the limit gently in ways that don't re-injure myself, but insisting on pushing that limit is bringing that emotional power back into it. And every time I do, I get a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. So it's like one more lesson that the power of our emotions, if we really build it up, really does heal us.
Right. And the being gentle with ourselves.
And being gentle. Oh, yes. Very important.
And knowing that it's a little bit at a time.
One
Patience,
step at a time.
I guess. Patience and determination working together.
Well, it's a funny thing because you're right. It is patient, but it's patient action. Isn't that an interesting concept? Patient action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's small, consistent forward motion.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the tortoise and the hare.
Yes, right.
The small, consistent action ends up winning, finishing, getting us to where we want to go. That's why I like the habit tracker so much. Whether you use a digital one or an analog one, it's nice to see the progress. And that that you've been on track. So there's too much going on in life to track every single thing, but I like the idea of keeping some kind of log of our intentions, of what we're doing to get to the goal.
Well, that's why I was thinking of an app. I mean, because with an app, you can just hit a button saying, I just had something good happen. And then if we feel like we have the time, we can add a note about what it was.
I like it.
Because even in the instant gratification world of today, we can always take out an app and just press a button and we're done. We can handle that much.
I just like that you said, just pull out the app and say, I just had good, push the button that says, I just had something good happen.
Yep.
I feel like I would just be pushing that button all day long.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because I think that would actually build up in your own mind that everything's going well for you.
Right? Momentum.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what we want to do. And I think that health and wellness might be one of those areas where it seems sometimes difficult to build momentum. Because when we talk about momentum, I mean, when I hear the word, I think about speed and, sometimes recovery from an injury or just getting well from some kind of illness, or even if we're not ill and not injured, but we just want to be in better shape, in better health. We just want to, up level our health to a new, better level of vibrancy. It doesn't usually happen overnight.
That's right.
It usually takes time to make that progress. Or maybe if we're an athlete and we're going for certain goals, we want to, run faster or longer or, jump higher or whatever it is with our sport. Those things take practice and time as well. And so I think that just being consistent, but tracking our progress does so much for our mental state of well-being about it.
I think so too. I think it makes a big difference.
Looking and saying, look at that, like, looking back and seeing where we were when we started.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in fact, Louise and I met with some friends recently for lunch, and he is dealing with cancer. He's got pretty serious pancreatic cancer. And we were all trying to just keep the lunch as lighthearted as possible and just, take advantage of the fact that he was having a good day and just play it up and so forth. And yet, inevitably, as usually happens, at one point, the conversation, for whatever reason, I don't remember exactly what, but for whatever reason, it meandered into some depressing topic. And the depressing statement was made and it was reinforced. And yes, oh, that's so terrible. And then we're all kind of sitting there quietly. And I said, well, now I feel totally depressed. And everybody laughed. It kind of broke the ice a little bit. But it reminded me, boy, oh boy, even when we're deliberately trying to refocus, it's so easy to fall into the direction we don't want to fall into. And the key thing that I think we're bringing out here in today's discussion is you don't let that stop you. Just the fact that we fell into that, we just go ahead anyway. Just, okay, all right, we fell off the wagon, get back on the wagon.
That's exactly the picture I had in my mind. I was like, well, I mean, sometimes you fall off a bike and you can't get back up.
Right.
But it's like when we trip and fall, we don't just decide, all right, I'm done. We usually, call for help or get up ourselves and walk back or do whatever we can. I mean, we want to keep going. And so, yeah, it's a process.
Mm-hmm. It's a process, and it's a process that we need to stick to. That's the skill we have to develop. We think that we have to develop the skill of being good at doing the process, of doing the thing that we're doing in the middle of the process. But what we're really trying to develop is the skill of continuing to do the process.
Right. Exactly. Is just keep going. One of my mentors says that all the time. That's kind of her sign off for things. Just keep going. Just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. Keep going. Okay. Doing great. Keep going. Had a setback. Keep going.
That's right.
It's like the multi-purpose, encouragement, but keep going. And so, yeah, with wellness and health and anything that we're trying to achieve in our body physically, there's got to be that idea that we keep going, that we stay with.
There is one thing we don't want to keep going with. The one thing we don't want to keep going with is the bad feeling stuff. So we don't want to keep going with focusing on, this feels bad, or I'm hurting, or all this. That's the stuff we don't want to keep going with.
I thought of something when you were talking about the screaming pain,
mm-hmm.
and I was thinking, it's very hard to focus on other things when you're in intense pain, because the pain is screaming at you.
That's right.
And it brought to mind the thought of, we've all seen the parent in the store with the little kid who's having a tantrum.
Mm-hmm.
The kid is screaming at them, pulling on their clothes. Mom, 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 dad, dad, whatever, trying to get their attention.
Mm-hmm.
And often the parent is just trying to get through the task. And so either not answering the child or just saying, just a second, and just focusing on whatever they're doing. And I always think, if we just give that child our full attention,
yes,
for a few moments, look them in the eye. Okay, what is it that you need? And take care of them. A lot of times that's enough. Not saying it works every time, but it made me think about the magic trick with the pain. I think that's what we're doing. Part of our body's screaming at us for our attention. And now we're giving it our full attention. Not in an attempt to shut it up, just in a very non-judgmental, observatory way.
Mm-hmm.
What number is it? What color is it? What temperature is it? What size is it? What shape is it? I think that's part of why it works. Now, it's completely different than the technique that we were talking about, where you got really determined and fired up emotionally and said, I'm not going to feel like this. I'm going to change this. I'm going to focus on what feels better. I'm not going to it's two different angles. So there are lots of different methods to try.
Exactly.
You find one that works for you.
And despite the fact that they're different angles, they actually do have one thing in common. The one thing that they share in common is that they don't give in to the thing that they don't want.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if you know, Tom Wells is now doing just the Friday podcast. The Monday morning podcast is now being done by somebody new on our team, a guy who lives in London, England, named Louis D'Souza, who's actually been one of our listeners, and he came on to a show that Joel and I did about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and was really great on the show, and had already expressed to me he wanted to be a co-host if that was possible. And then Tom tells me, well, I don't want to do the Monday morning podcast anymore. I just want to do the Friday. So I brought him on to do the Monday morning podcast. So we had our first podcast this past Monday.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yay.
One of the stories that Louis told was a great story about how he has two very, very young daughters, ages 2 and 3, I believe they are. And one of them was having a meltdown, which apparently was very unusual for her. And there was some sort of event going on. So he took her into a quiet space somewhere and just sat with her. And just sat with her and didn't try to do anything, didn't try to talk her out of it, didn't try to point out silver linings. She just sat with her. And finally, at one point, she says, okay, I'm ready now. And then they left.
Oh, I love this.
All he did was just sit there and love her. That was it.
Yeah.
He gave her his attention. And that's what you're talking about, giving the attention. Because that's really all the child really needs at that point is attention. And
right.
At some point, she had enough attention, and so she was able to get herself back into alignment again. I thought that was great. Story. Isn't that great?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I think that, I often use this example, but I think it's valid. And that is when our bodies are trying to say something to us and we ignore them.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is, we talk about like a gut feeling about something.
Yes.
Right? Or we talk about, this is how our higher self often speak to us through our emotions and through our feelings, right? They're two different things. We often use the word interchangeable, but feeling is a knot in my stomach. My shoulders feel tight, right? Those are feelings. And then emotions, sad, happy, mad, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so when our body is speaking to us, it uses both of those things. When our higher self speaks to us, it speaks to us in different ways. And those are a couple of the ways through our physical body, because this is the instrument that it has to work with.
Yes, right.
And when we ignore it, I remember someone telling me one time they had been in an emotionally abusive relationship for years, but no one really knew it because they didn't confide in anyone. And they did finally end up getting out of the relationship. But what she said to me after the fact, after she was happy and saying, yes, we're not together anymore, and I feel so much better, she said, for the last year we were together, every time the car pulled in the driveway, I got a knot in my stomach. Wow. Well, her body was speaking to her loud and clear.
Yeah.
And what happens often when our body is speaking to us and trying to tell us something and we don't listen is it gets louder. And, when do we finally listen? Sometimes it takes until it's screaming at us
yeah.
and we're in pain, and then we finally listen. But I have so many stories of the same type of thing where someone's body was in pain and we started talking to the pain and figuring it out. And the body was really just giving a very strong message about something to the person. Our bodies often speak in metaphors.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And we use them consciously too, right? We go, something was a pain in the neck or whatever.
Well, you mentioned the gut too, about there being a pain in the gut. And I won't describe it as chronic. It used to be chronic. It no longer is. But I often get a pain in the gut. And it made me realize what we were just talking about today, that I just need to pay more attention to that. Because what's the main point we've been making? You just keep trying to do it anyway. And the reason I say that is very often in the past, like you say, the gut or whatever is trying to get your attention to tell you something, so you have to ask it what it is. Very often I've asked my gut, what's going on? And I get no answer. And so I give up because I'm not getting an answer. And I think the point, the great takeaway is don't give up. Okay, you didn't get an answer, so ask again tomorrow. Ask again in an hour.
Or start, or just the fact that you say, don't give up, ask again is a sign that your awareness is opening about it, right?
Yeah,
In other
exactly.
words, some people aren't even aware of it at all because they push it aside and ignore it and just don't pay attention. But when you start asking it, that says to me, okay, well, you're building this awareness of, okay, why is this going on? And pretty soon, there are patterns that we start to recognize. We go, oh, okay, every time this happens, I get this sensation.
Yep.
And we'll figure it out. Our bodies are really smart. And we know now that there's actually a second or third brain that resides in the gut. And so that whole idea of a gut instinct or, whatever is actually literally true. So our bodies are amazing and miraculous and are speaking to us all the time. And just opening that awareness to where we start paying attention is like brings some miraculous results.
That's a great point. Something else that speaks to me every day that we do a podcast is the clock when it says we got about 3 minutes left. You got to get the PR announcements in. So I'm going to take a few minutes to get the PR announcements in, and they're always the same ones, but they're so important. I have to keep making them because they're important. The first one is, if you are not yet a subscriber to this podcast, please become a subscriber. It's so easy to do. The instructions are on our homepage at loatoday.net, or you can just go on your iPhone through your podcast software and just do a search on LOA Today, and we'll pop up right there. There's a subscribe button. You click it, and now you're subscribed. So please do become a subscriber so that you can get all these great episodes coming to your phone and getting all this information. And we're putting out scads of really useful information every single week, and you don't want to miss any of it. So please do become a subscriber. Also, for those who are subscribers, if you've been listening for some time now and you're part of our effort to get the word out so that more and more people can get their daily doses of happy, we want you to keep doing it. It's working. Cindie, I don't know if I've told you, but in the last 2.5 months or so, the number of downloads of our podcast per day has about doubled. And it's happened while we've been doing this thing of asking people to post something about loatoday.net in their favorite social media channel. So
Wonderful.
We got to keep doing it, and we got to do it even more. Those who haven't been doing it, start doing it. If you've been doing it a little bit, do it a lot. It's really, really, really paying off. More and more people are finding out about us, and boy, is that a good thing. Can you imagine what happens when the entire world starts saying, you know what, I want to focus on the positive instead of on the negative. I want to start attracting what I want to deliberately attract into my life instead of being depressed and frustrated. How does that change the world? I mean, I can't even begin to imagine how much it changes the world. Well, I can begin to. I can do that much. I'm not sure I can imagine the whole thing, but I can begin to. So, yeah, please do keep posting in your favorite social media channels that you're listening to loatoday.net. Just want to make sure we got those 2 messages in.
Perfect.
So we've got about 1.5 minutes left, and music starts about a half minute before we're done. So let's try to summarize 2 things. Well, first of all, you're a fabulous coach. So for those people who need like a private session, how do they reach out to you? And then the second thing is, what's our final thought for the day?
They can reach out to me at my home on the web, cindiechavez.com, CindieChavez.com. Reach out and say hello. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to help you if I can. And our final thought for the day is, it either feels better or it doesn't. Reach for what feels better. Keep going. That's it.
That simplifies it, doesn't it? It either feels better or it doesn't. And just keep going for the stuff that feels better, even if you don't get there.
Yeah.
Just don't stop. Don't give up just because you didn't get there this time. Because you'll get there another time. And the more that we do, like you said, the process starts to open up, and we start getting there more and more often. And now we're actually improving. Trust the process. Good final thought. I like that one. Thank you. That's a good reminder. That's the one we have to do every single day. So, Cindie, this is good. What's even better is we get to do it again tomorrow morning.
Yes, I'll be back tomorrow morning.
I will as well. And we hope that you're back here, not just tomorrow, but every time we do a podcast here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.